First time I ever heard the New Orleans Rhythm Kings, I didn't think I was going to be really impressed. I was much more interested in Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, and especially Bix Beiderbecke at that time. But Vince Giordano convinced me to give them a listen and see how they might have paved the way for my favorite musicians. So I bought an old CD. It wasn't very good copy, but the first notes I heard and said, "Whoa, what a band."
The New Orleans Rhythm Kings, one of the pioneering jazz bands on record, started out in 1921 as the house band of the Friars Inn, a Chicago nightclub. Composed of New Orleans musicians Paul Morez on trumpet, Leon Roppolo on clarinet, and George Brunies on trombone, along with Midwesterners Jack Pettis on saxophone and Elmer Schoebel at the piano, the group soon attracted a sizable following. Blending New Orleans lyricism with Chicago energy, their brand of jazz was fresh and airy as well as hot, and they redirected the public's attention to what jazz was at its core, and in doing so, influenced scores of musicians who would carry it into the future.
The New Orleans Rhythm Kings are the first jazz band on record to play what we call hot jazz. That is to say, they played with no trace of caricature whatsoever, even on their earliest recordings, which are from 1922. They sound mature and fully formed right off the bat.
In 1922 and 1923, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings navigated dishonest managers and hazardous roads to undertake several trips to Richmond, Indiana, where they made a series of records that captured their zesty, original music for posterity. While the original Dixieland Jazz Band is often cited as having made the first jazz record, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings may well boast the first great jazz soloist on record, clarinetist Leon Roppolo.
Roppolo seems to be a rather shadowy figure. He never wrote letters, he was never interviewed, and he disappeared from the music scene at a very early age, about 25. I found a lot of as told to stories by other members of the band, but nothing about Leon Roppolo. And he's the one that really grabbed me. Just listening to that clarinet, he comes in on beat 2, hits these soaring high notes, and does little runs all down the scale. I thought he was fantastic.
At a recording session in July 1923, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings played host to guest pianist Jelly Roll Morton for some of his very first recordings. With Jelly in the piano chair, Chink Martin on tuba, and Ben Pollack at the drums, just listen to the wonderful New Orleans slow drag tempo that the band achieves. It neither drags nor lurches, but rather has a delicious sway that seems to go in both directions at once. Trouble at the Friars Inn and Musicians' Union woes led to a breakup of the New Orleans Rhythm Kings in 1923. Drummer Ben Pollack went on to form his own highly successful orchestra. Bassist Steve Brown went on to success with Gene Goldkett and later Paul Whiteman, and George Brunies joined up with Ted Lewis. But the band's two most distinctive voices, trumpeter Paul Merez and clarinetist Leon Roppolo, returned to their native New Orleans and in 1925 made a few more recordings in the Crescent City with a reformed New Orleans Rhythm Kings. The recordings of the New Orleans Rhythm Kings are a cornerstone in jazz history. Scores of reissues have kept them in print for more than 75 years, but often in substandard sound that has muffled the excitement of these groundbreaking performances. Part of the problem is that the metal masters were destroyed even before the outbreak of World War II, leaving only commercial 78 RPM pressings for source material. After years of play on wind-up phonographs with heavy sound boxes, those copies that survived were frequently in worn condition. Past reissues have often relied upon poor source material, making do with 78s in less than ideal condition, or tape copies when original discs were unavailable. For this extraordinary new CD set, Rivermont has teamed up with Off the Record, the people behind recent reissues of King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band and Big Spiderbeck and the Wolverines. Over the course of a decade, we have sought out the very best conditioned 78 RPM discs for every master and alternative take, and they have all been freshly transferred and restored by renowned audio engineer Doug Benson.
This is a crucially important project because the producers were able to track down the best known copies of all of the original recordings, and they have been faithfully and brilliantly restored. And that makes this a listening experience that is truly special, even for those who are already intimately familiar with these performances.
Rivermont's new complete edition of the New Orleans Rhythm Kings comes to you with a deluxe 40-page booklet featuring dozens of rare photographs and an extensive history of the band by historian Sue Fischer, detailing, for the first time from original sources, the remarkable history of this legendary band. The booklet also features complete discographical and technical information, along with an in-depth listening guide by two-time Grammy nominee David Sager to enhance your enjoyment and appreciation of the records. Rediscover the band that excited a generation of jazz musicians. Here, for the first time in sparkling clarity, the band that made the Friars Inn one of the most talked-about Chicago bottle joints in the early years of the Roaring Twenties. Learn the remarkable true story of the band's dealings with gangsters, crooked promoters, and a musical genius consumed by madness. Rivermont and Off the Record are pleased to present the complete recordings of the New Orleans Rhythm Kings.
Bye.